3, 2.
Greetings, college hoop diehards. Matthew Cox, Jimothy Root, Kyle McKeon, the known associates of the Three Man Weave College Basketball Podcast, streaming live on YouTube right now. If you found us through Twitter, thank you for joining us on the airwaves. If you're listening via recorded fashion, hopefully we sound just as good in playback. Mr. McKeon, Mr. Root, just, house cleaning, general life inquiries. Things that bother you, rub you the wrong way, Kai. What are some observational humor, a la Jerry Seinfeld of sorts?
Wow. Hey, have you seen Airline Pilot? I wasn't ready for that, Matthew. I'm gonna go ahead and pass that one over to Jim. But I am excited for your bachelor party, which we are leaving for Charleston tomorrow on the same flight, as well as many other boys going with us. I couldn't be more excited. Jim, Thursday to Sunday, it's going to be quite the trip to celebrate old Matthew Cox.
Kai, are you going to be a content king on this trip? You are typically our content king.
I like to take a lot of pictures, and it's good to have because I always send them to the group.
Ashok will be there. Ashok will carry that freight for us. So our buddy Ashok, for those not privy, shout out to Ashok back from across the pond. Jim, I'm ready. Mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. The last stand.
You got all the rules from the wife or fiance about what to do and what
she's going to call in every hour on the hour just to check in, get a status update. So that'll be a fun little cadence. But yes, college basketball is why we're actually gathered around the podcast heard today. It's our off-season conference review series continuing with the Big East. Not as many teams to discuss. Maybe we'll go a little deeper into some of these guys today, but just going to basically review where is the state of the program.
Let's just have a shorter episode instead. How about that?
Jim wants to get in, get out. I like that. We have a lot to do this week. I agree. Jim, got a pack, I don't know. I'm getting a haircut, I think, tonight, maybe if I have time. Got to get my tux fitted for the wedding tonight as well. Mr. McKeon Suit Supply. Shout out to Suit Supply, support the sponsors, future sponsor, hopefully, maybe. But yeah, let's get into it here. Thank you, Jay Pitty, aka Joe Pascal, for the intro and outro music, the best in the college basketball podcast realm. If you don't already follow us on Twitter, that's at 3MW_CBB. The same handle applies on Insta, where we will be flooding the airwaves with hot boy content this weekend from the low country in Charlestown.
Sure, why not?
And also subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, among other platforms where you can leave reviews of the 5-star variety. In fact, that is the only variety we really tolerate. And if you do so, Kai will read that review. We'll discuss it on this podcast. Kai, take it away.
From longtime listener, dreaming of greatness. First off, best college basketball podcast out there. Thank you. Apple should add a 6-star option for this podcast. Love that feedback. As I hear you all talk about the ACC and how some programs, i.e. Va-Tech, will never be great, I find myself wondering, as it pertains to basketball, are most schools just waiting until they find their diamond in the rough and a coach, a Scott Drew, Mark Few type, who will take over a program destined for mediocrity or worse and build it into a powerhouse? Or is that a job that works for an AD of a power conference school? Is that what they try to do, they strive to do? Or are schools like Va-Tech, Oregon State, Washington State, DePaul satisfied being, quote unquote, lame ducks in their conference and never really aiming for top tier status? Well, Jim, it certainly varies by school how much your department cares about athletics and whatnot. That definitely goes into it.
Yeah, the quote he threw at us of, quote, never be great. Like, man, that feels harsh. Do we say that? That's really mean. Most of these schools are probably striving for something on a cycle where they have the one great year that's kind of like a build. I remember the Bruce Weber Kansas State teams were very much like that. Like, as they got everybody old and experienced, stuck around, then you have the great year. But if you're not, at the top, the big swinging D in terms of NIL money, it's probably going to be harder to repeat success over and over again. Same way it was when you weren't like the Kansas or the Duke getting those recruits. It's kind of the same way in the portal era. And Matt, it's tough. Like, if it's not somebody that is an alum, a lot of these schools, our own included, Kai, maybe not Matt's two favorite teams, but are more stepping stone type schools, jobs to get the great job at Indiana or Duke, et cetera, that kind of thing. So you just hope you have a guy that's good enough to get promoted to one of those schools and take the good years when you have them.
Yep. Just like, professional teams in mid-markets, Jim. You're an unfortunate victim of being both a Midwestern sports professional fan and a, call it tier 2 or whatever college program where you're at. You're not at the Indianas or the Dukes or the big blue bloods with all the money at our disposal. Ha ha ha. Yeah, Kai, continue.
That's it. By the way, you have a very brave fanship, Matthew. Just want to applaud you how brave you are.
Here's the thing.
It's
not as fun when we win though. Like it means way more and it's way cooler. You get more upside, more ROI, more yield when Mizzou or insert other program wins. So take that for what it's worth. Personal corner, yes, Charleston, as we discussed at nauseum, will be there this weekend. Pat Kelsey, come say hi, or other Coug Hoopers. Roster, who's on the roster still? Any cool guys we like that's still there? Anyway,
Rain Smith is still raining.
Good. Come on down, Rain. We'll make it rain on the boat on Sattersman, won't we? And new website updates? Absolutely not. We have nothing to show. Off-season laziness is very, very prevalent. Donate some money, buy some merch, but more importantly, let's round it up. That's what we all came here for.
Let's round it up, Matthew, and that means we're talking new school alert. Division I, hello. This is brand spanking new news as of this morning from multiple sources. Le Moyne jumping up to Division I level in the NEC. Syracuse now has two different schools, big time rivalry there. Hopefully those teams play every single season. Remember Patrick Beeline was there. They beat Syracuse one year, Kai, in the preseason. It was like a whole Syracuse is doomed this year. And I think they made like the Elite Eight that year or something. They ended up just fine. But hey, it's kind of fun, Matt. We got a second Dolphins up at the Division I level. We're still net down one school from last year without Hartford and St. Francis College. So yeah, all around, I'm okay with this. Two Dolphins. That's fun.
360 is our sweet spot, Jim. That's where we need to lock in the number. Unless we do like the full blown like relegation promotion, which I'm very in favor of. But if we're going to keep it, I'm okay. Yeah, 250 is fine too.
Kai, where do you land?
Sure. I don't think we need any more teams, but hey, it's only good stuff. I shall not be fading Le Moyne. Do not fade first year teams. It usually does not work out very well. It's very tough to rate, and usually they're underrated.
They're always good. Yeah, they're always good.
Yeah, we'll have to look up ATS record for first year in D1. It anecdotally feels like very strong for those teams. It's just hard to rate them. You don't know. At least the
beginning, right? Before you have all the information.
Yeah, and then later in the year, books have the info. Coaching news, Matt. We got to go to you because your boy Bobby Huggins stepped in it a little bit this week on the radio. Said two, and I mean he didn't say two different slurs, homophobic slurs, but he said them back to back. So it was very clearly like, this is the word I'm trying to say. And it was not a mistake. It's bad news. The punishment just came out right before we were getting on the air here. 3-game suspension, $1 million reduction in salary, sensitivity training, which I don't really even know what that means or what it matters to a 70-plus-year-old, but he's still the coach. That's rather important. Matt, your thoughts on Huggy Bear kind of showing, I'm not going to say true colors, but just kind of like the era that he's from, right?
Yeah, right. Like just, different generation, whatever. Not going to make excuses for him, but I think probably explains.
To be very clear, bad. Don't do this.
But you can understand it, certainly, when you look at it from that lens. I just want to see some pictures of Huggins in the, like a behind-the-scenes TMZ shot of him in the classroom, Kai 1v1 with the pencil and paper, just taking copious notes as he waltzes through those chapters of sensitivity training. That's what I want to see come out of this. And hopefully, a rehabilitated man.
Kai, like the stuff you have to do at a company every year for trainings. Is this the right interaction? Can I say this? It's like, no.
He apologized. It seemed pretty sincere on his multiple social media accounts. So he obviously regrets this. He's being punished for it. I'm glad he didn't lose his job, but it's good he got punished.
Yeah, the really weird, surprising thing was, and Gary Parrish wrote about this, is that his friend, Tom Brenneman, got fired for saying this word on a hot mic, not even intentionally on there.
That's true, yeah.
Got fired for it. He brought Tom Brenneman to a practice to speak to the team like 6 months afterwards, talked about how much he had learned from his buddy going through this, and then says it very clearly, like premeditated, or not premeditated, but like wasn't a mess up, wasn't like a misstep of a word. He reiterated it was a mess. It was bad. Punishment it's good to see that they didn't just like walk around it, but hopefully Huggy avoids future incident. That's I guess where we'll leave it here. Recruiting news, got to go to Kai because I know how much he loves Bronny James. He is committed to USC, 5-star, 4-star. Kind of depends where you look, actually. I don't know. We'll see if he lives up to the 5-star billing immediately, becomes a one and done. But Kai going to a pretty loaded backcourt with Boogie Ellis, Isaiah Collier. Seems like that is more his role. I just keep reading how good of a defender he is at the point of attack, a good complementary shooter. And he's going to be close to Papa Bear. So what do you think of USC right now with Bronny in the fold?
Whatever. They have talent every single year. They never reached expectations except the year they had Evan Mobley, a top 5 pick in the NBA, a true unicorn in the sport. I don't think they're going to be that good next year. They'll be overrated, is my take.
Unless Collier is that good, right? I don't know.
Yeah, we'll right. Having Collier kind of like, it's like, oh, they got Bronny. No, they have Collier. That's the the guy.
The big deal needs to be made here. Right. Matt, Pac-12 favorite. Saw that like thrown around like very clear Pac-12 favorite in some people's minds. Do you agree?
No way.
Considering what UCLA, Arizona, I don't know.
I grabbed some USC future money. I did. I think there's actual real upside here, but I'm with Kai. I think that's I'm going to throw cold water on the clear-cut Pac-12 front-runner take. I think they could be elite defensively, so I give them a pretty high floor. And then obviously, if the talent sort of, shines through on offense, it's gonna be a lot of rides on Collier. I mean, Boogie Ellis can hoop. I like Boogie Ellis. Up front, DJ Rodman. I like that roster. I'm an Andy guy, Kai. I'm a convert. as of circa 2022 in Mr. Enfield.
Wow, look at you. Just ebbs and flows with our love for coaches. I feel like that happens.
I can't believe you're an Andy guy. All of a sudden, you're an Andy guy.
Not a great tournament showing after we just sparkled him with how awesome he is in the postseason. Then he kind of flopped there against Michigan State. But still, I believe he is an improving and evolving coach, Kai, which we want to see some adaptability out of the head honchos.
Since 2017, he's outperformed his KenPom preseason rank once at USC. Once. That was maybe Evan Mobley.
His preseason rank is so high because he did so great the previous year. I don't know. That's actually
I never know why they're always ranked so high. It's kind of odd, right?
Yeah, talent is usually pretty high there. They did get DJ Rodman as well. We'll say it now rather than in the transfer part. I saw Pat Taylor mentioned in the chat. Matt, you mentioned it as well. A nice, versatile, bigger wing defender, considering that they're likely going to start Collier, Ellis, and Bronny. And that's 3 small guys. So you got to have somebody else that's a bigger body you can put on wings. And that fit seems to make sense. They've got shot blocking up front. We'll see how it goes. USC, like Kai said, they've had talent before and only really, truly performed to it once. We also got 4-star shooting guard Isaiah Coleman headed to Seton Hall and 4-star center Churchill Abbas to DePaul. He's from the NBA Africa program, filling out that roster a week after, the week we are talking Big East. So a lot more discussion to come on those programs. We won't dive into it much here. Nothing happening in the 2024 recruiting world, but boy, we've got some transfers to discuss, including arguably the best player in the portal. I say arguably because it is not clear. Hunter Dickinson headed to Kansas. Kai, I don't know if he's the best player in the portal, but man, the fit is awesome. A coach that is incredible at maximizing big guys, has played through the post before, has been very flexible and not played through it when he doesn't have a post score. But you look back at like the McCormick years and you go way, way back to some of the, even like as a bouquet was closer, but like Simeon Collison, he's been fantastic at figuring out high-low with bigs. I think you can do that with KJ Adams. There's rumors they might get Mbako, the Duke decommit.
Yep.
Is this the number 1 team in the country, Kai? That's the question I posed to you because that was a much discussed topic after they got Mr. Hunter D.
I would have to look at all the other teams, Jim. I don't think so. I think he is absolutely the number 1 transfer, though. I'm not sure you can really debate that, actually.
He's playing the tournament. I don't know. He's
a
2 first-round NBA picks on his team.
He probably would have been an All-American this year if his team made the tournament.
Whose fault is it that his team didn't make the tournament?
Juwan Howard. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Okay. Matt, I don't know. How good do you think Kansas is with Dickinson in the fold? Still a little bit of a lack of shooting on that team, but man, he's going to be a hub for that offense.
Yeah, that's why Mbako would be huge. I think he's regarded as a pretty good shot maker. But Dickinson to me is like a kind of an X factor. Like you could see a world where he just sort of isn't that good and doesn't fit, but Kansas is still fine without him. Like he's kind of relegated.
Not good.
I'm saying going to run the offense through him.
No, right. I think he's going to be. So I'm saying there's a worst case scenario in which I think he actually isn't that great and doesn't really impact winning like we sort of saw with Michigan. But I think Self's good enough to adapt, even if that happens with the roster they have intact. But I think the more likely scenario is that there's just this renaissance of Dickinson being a monster, putting his head down, playing with the Self, tutelage, and it just all works. That's a good roster. I think it's not Duke good, but probably number 2 for me right now, Jim.
Yeah, I mean, the last 2 years, Michigan's had real problems defensively. in terms of pick and roll coverage, ball screen stuff, because he's just not very good in space. But he is so skilled offensively. Kai, what are you going to say?
I don't like the guy, but he is a really good basketball player. He shot 42% from 3 last year.
Yeah, started
57. I mean, he's good. He's really good.
Yeah, but fairly low volume, but he's adding that. He passed the ball decently well. I didn't feel like he was a black hole when I watched. Like he actually was able to spray the ball around. And although Kansas might not have shooters dotting the perimeter at this point, but Elmarko Jackson, Nick Timberlake, I know Matt loves him, so he'll be a Jayhawk guy next year. Matthew Cleveland headed to Miami, Florida, the latest addition to the Life Wallet University Hurricanes, kind of the perfect fit. Guy that sort of fills that 6'7" tweener role that Jordan Miller leaves behind. Not quite the hyper tools Swiss Army knife, Matt, that we love about Jordan Miller, but Cleveland fits, gives them that lineup versatility, a lot of guard play now, can spread the ball or spread the floor around Omier. Seems like Hurricanes are going to be pretty darn good again. You agree?
Right. I think this is a no-brainer, like bounce back. Cleveland has his best campaign. I just think it's a great system fit. It's staying close to home. Feel bad for you, Mizzou Tigers, as that was, I know, a potential get for you guys. But I feel pretty good about Matthew Cleveland stock going forward.
I saw somewhere called Miami a surefire top 10 team. I disagree with that take on the whole. Yeah, Cleveland's good. He's not as good as Jordan Miller. And Isaiah Wong was ACC Player of the Year last year. I don't see how this team is much better, if better at all, than last season.
Don't you doubt Wooga Poplar again. Don't you dare.
I think Wooga Poplar is very good. I think this is probably a top 25 team, but depth's not there yet. And again, Wong and Miller were incredibly important.
Yeah, defensive issues that they had last year are still there. I know they had like a decent run of defensive performances in the tournament, and postseason success always leads to hype, but there's still some question marks. Like Kai said, I think you can pretty solidly say top 25, and then you get to matter of opinion with how high you go in there. A couple of them we'll hit quicker here. Joe Girard to Clemson. Matt seems... Brad Brownell, I said this to you guys, he's straying further and further from the light if the light is playing good defense. Girard has been a part of some of Syracuse's worst defenses ever in that zone. I don't think of him as a really a contributor on that end, but they're going to have a lot of shooting, and that's kind of what they started to lean into at Clemson lately.
Yeah, they've kind of taken the same Syracuse and Boeheim's latter days evolution, but Brownell's just been better at harnessing that change. If they had a fully healthy front court the last couple of years, I think Clemson would have been like a real dark horse to make some noise. But obviously, it's just kind of part of the game. I don't think we'll be good. Defensively, yeah, worries, but you're right. This is kind of who Clemson is now, and I think it's actually kind of worked for them.
Yeah, it's worked to the point, except erratic outcomes, which is how they lost like 4 Q4 games last year.
Yeah, I think that's more injury stuff. And like, again, this kind of part of the roster construction, don't rely on guys who are as injury prone as, Tyson and Hall are, but that has been a pretty big bugaboo for them because they're awesome when they're right, man. Really good.
Yeah.
Jim, that
Tyson's
was
gone. No more Tyson. But
that was 2 straight intra-conference transfers, which you and I kind of talked about. Feels like there's way more of that this year. Rivalries just don't matter anymore. People just going wherever they want. There's no restrictions.
Familiarity. I wonder if it's like, okay, I know this coach and I played against him, and he told me in the handshake line that he'd love to have me or something. I don't know if that's what's going on, but it does seem like it is more and more frequent. Other ones to mention: Jaden Bradley to Arizona. I think they needed another ball handler, creator in the backcourt.
Yep.
Huge. Awesome transition player, and they get up and down. So I think that's good. They're still going to struggle a little bit with spacing around their bigs. Because Jaden Bradley, not a knockdown shooter, but he's got talent, and I think will be a good fit in that pace. A guy we talked about internally just as a part of a whole here, Jalen Tyson to Cal. Man, the Bears are intriguing. Amac, Cone, Matt, you love Keontae Kennedy, even though you might have thought it was Keandre Kennedy.
I did, Jim. I did. I did.
There's too many of them. I did. Too many. But Madsen is terrific. What he did at Utah Valley over multiple years was super impressive, improving even on what Mark Pope did there. We all think Cal is like a decent shot at a tournament team, right? And we all dipped in on the 1,000-to-1 futures odds.
Mm-hmm. If I gave you kind of plus 120 Cal tourney next year, you saying yeah or saying nah?
I don't think that's very good value.
Good odds, Mr. Odds Maker. Okay. Oh, okay.
I think I'd prefer like plus 150.
I think they're going to be a tournament team. I mean, you can't really rely totally on like the the Cone Meadows backcourt. I think Cone is very good, and he was a 4-star talent, but there's still like a little bit of jury out there. And
guard short, maybe.
Devin Askew's still on the team. So if Mark Madsen decides to play Askew a lot, this team won't be that great. But yeah, 1,000 to 1. Yeah, we took their future because that's a no-brainer. This team's way better than that.
Big miss for Matt to not say, Kai, let me ask you this. Come on,
no,
there it was.
It was a hit by me to not do that, Jim. So I stand by that decision.
Ooh, I think you always got to jump in on those. They're currently 70th by Bart Torvik's projections. Seems fair with upside to get better than that. And I think 1,000 to 1. Why not? RJ Luis to St. John's. Kai, he was, competent when we were betting on UMass a lot early in the season, and he's a little erratic, but he's a freshman. So a guy that Patino can craft into a Big East caliber player.
Yeah, just wait for the next couple of guys at St. John's. They're going to get a couple other big guys that are going to be
more Johnnies to discuss. Yeah, possibly Dingleberry. We'll see. Trey White to Louisville. Pat, shout out to you in the chat. He DM'd me. If this is the big transfer get for Louisville, then we've got problems. And this was praised like, oh, what a snag. Like I don't think he would have started at most tournament teams. He's solid, but I do think Louisville needs more. Matt, I think we're still kind of out despite this addition. I mean, it's a very solid one. It'll be a piece for him, but he's not like a home run program changer.
No, but it's funny that he is the most celebrated transfer they've probably gotten. Bar is low right now. Needs to be risen, in my opinion.
Yep. Ish Masood to Georgetown. Just thinks it gives them a nice rotational shooter. Obviously provided a bunch of big buckets in that Kansas State tournament run to the Elite Eight. DJ Rodman to USC we mentioned. And Kai, Jimmy Bell to Mississippi State.
Yeah.
It's rumored as the possible Mizzou finally at least plugs a hole in the overflowing dam of interior defense. But no, he is a true Chris Jans player, going to eat on the glass there, not be able to shoot at all. Makes sense.
It's a great fit. I'm disappointed that Mizzou couldn't offer more than Mississippi State. So that kind of tells you the state of Mizzou currently.
Yep. NIL seems a little bit dire.
Yep.
No interior defense. I just don't know how our Tigers have a competent defense next year. We will discuss that more when we get to our SEC season recap. That's it for transfers that we're going to hit now. Hey, Matt, you mentioned Charleston. We're heading down there. They are part of the Field of 68 tip-off, the first event here, inaugural, not first annual, as I've been, I believe, scolded by Matt on this very pod for saying. But Charleston, FAU, and Liberty are going to play a round robin for the next 3 years. All three will play each other, rotating the hosts. And it's, of course, our Field of 68 overlords presenting this event. This is great, man. I love this. Three awesome mid-major programs. No Darius McGee anymore for Liberty, but they're, I think, going to be just fine. And we're pretty content with Dusty May and Pat Kelsey at the other two schools that they will be good for years to come.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're company men, so we're going to side with our Field of 68 overlords, but they got this one right for sure. I mean, just love the format, love the longevity if they're going to keep this going, and what a bang to lead off with, FAU, a team that people think are going to be like top 10 good, and then Charleston is like the new, mini powerhouse mid-major out there, and Liberty obviously has been that for the last, half decade. So yes, well done, Jeffrey and Rob. My only compliment I'll probably give you all year.
I'm going to shout out Dagan too, because I feel like he just did a lot behind the scenes.
Yeah,
as
he probably
always.
did 10x more. He probably did 10x more.
Yeah, Jeff was just twiddling his thumbs. We've got rule changes coming to the NCAA, fellas. Kai, I know you and I had a little bit of a discussion about this in our internal channels. The big one, probably the most needle moving in terms of style, is the possible tweak to block charge calls.
Yep.
Whereas in the past, the defender had to be set before the offensive player was airborne. The change would be the defensive player must be set before the scorer is setting his feet to go airborne. So Kai, hopefully this leads to more blocks. And I believe the rules committee guy that proposed this said like that's the goal. We think more blocks should be called than charges. I just like that general idea. I don't know if this will totally move the needle that far, but I like that we're moving in that direction. Yeah,
it might be messy at first to start the season, like all these new changes are, but if it de-incentivizes people to take charges, fantastic. Get it out of the game. Verticality, preach that. Call less fouls if a guy's straight up in the air, and maintains verticality. Let's get that more into play in the game.
Yep. And to be clear, because I think there was some confusion, I'm with Kai on getting rid of the charge, but that's on secondary defenders. I don't want you sliding in there and just grabbing your nuts and pretending that's defense. Yeah. Again, I took charges in high school. I regret it now because it wasn't defense. Yeah, it was soft and bad defense. But if you're the primary defender and you're moving your feet and you get run over, I'm totally okay with that being an offensive foul still. It's just the lack of effort to really actually play defense when you're off the ball.
Right.
We've also got potential for airborne timeouts to be restored, which good. I love those. Those are great. A momentum changing timeout call, Kai. We love those.
Why take that out of the game to begin with? Yeah, a guy leaping out of bounds, calling a timeout. It's one of the coolest plays you can make. It's going to decrease weird turnovers. I love it. Fantastic. Good.
0 through 99 jersey numbers might be allowed. That's always been kind of a strange one. We're going to force refs to use two hands to call foul calls. That's fine. And then Matt, we might get a decrease in reviews in the final 2 minutes.
Please.
If this goes through, basically a coach, instead of just asking for everything to be reviewed in the final 2 minutes, coaches will have to ask and they will lose a timeout if they get it wrong. It's basically a challenge. And you have to have a timeout to ask for it. So timeout management also going to become very important, Mr. Cox.
Yeah, I like that. I still think the issue is the length of the reviews. Like we need to put like a pitch clock on the review process, which I know puts the onus on the refs. Like why would the NCAA put their own guys under the gun? Obviously not going to probably come to fruition there, but that's where we're all like pulling our hair out, right? Like why is this taking 5 minutes? It's less of like, why has there been 5 reviews in the final minute? I think the latter is annoying, but the former is what's like the most mind boggling to me.
Well, let's stop reviewing if a guy just gets popped in the face and you didn't see it. Why do we have to review that?
The intentional versus unintentional stuff.
Oh, it's like, wait, hold on. Let's review to see if something crazy just happened. Usually doesn't. Usually results.
Yeah. I just don't like it. Anytime a player does this, the spinning signal, player or coach outside in the final 2 minutes, like, well, we got to look at it now. Like, have a little more conviction with your calls. Like, nope, I'm right. We don't have to look at that one. I like this. This is going to be, you have to really think about what you asked to get reviewed. I'm good with that. All right, let's pivot to a little bit more somber note here. Shout out to North Carolina Central's Devin Butts and his family. Passed away after going through cardiac arrest at an off-season workout. I didn't see a ton of like real mainstream coverage of this, but we are a lover of mid-majors, and I remember writing about Butts like 3 years ago in a MEAC preseason preview, and it's just like really surreal to see it come full circle like this, and it's super sad. I think a teammate, it was like a players only thing, guys. So a teammate had tried to perform CPR on him and keep him alive, and he ended up getting onto a ventilator at the hospital, but didn't make it ultimately. So thoughts and prayers to the family there and to the NCCU basketball family, Lavelle Melton and company. Just a really tragic thing to happen. Then Denny Crum, all-time legend in the coaching world, Louisville, true coaching legend there, passed away as well. I believe he was 86 years old. Not always was never an ACC coach, Matt, so not a rival for your Duke Blue Devils, but just a truly titan name among the Dean Smiths and all the classic coaches. It's sad to see Crum move on.
Yeah, we've lost a few too many coaching legends the last feels like 2 calendar years. So yeah, it's good to see a lot of the memoriams that are posted on Twitter. I like going back through memory lane there.
Yeah, just reading kind of the tributes and recapping all the incredible accomplishments. So shout out to Louisville and Denny Crum. It's finally a positive Cardinals thought here, at least in the tribute to him.
Remembrance.
Kai, you want to close with a little bit of quick chat questions from folks before we get into the Big East?
Well, I appreciate this. This is the best part about having our podcast live, guys. You can ask questions during the pod. We'll address them. Tournament bracket in the chat. Can my Vols, Tennessee, do anything in March next year? And then part 2, will NC State make the tournament? Hard to believe Tennessee does anything. I'm kind of giving up on Rick Barnes. He's had incredible teams and has failed to do much with Tennessee. Never say never. Small sample size theater in the tournament, but gosh, there might be something to that. NC State, sure, they made it last year, but I think right now this team is not as good as last season. Matthew?
Yeah, torn on this team. I kind of liked them a lot last year. I don't know. Yeah,
it's
It is early. Let's see.
Tennessee, I don't know. I think he asked about Connect in there, Dalton Connect, and man, I like him as an offensive player. It's just such a weird fit. Now you can make a case Tennessee hasn't won because the offense has held them back repeatedly in postseason. So you can't really blame them for going out and getting somebody with real offensive punch that maybe detracts a little bit on the defensive end. You've got to cover for his weaknesses. So we'll see. I guess I like that Barnes is going outside of his typical player style box there. I'm skeptical that Connect earns minutes for them. I think Barnes is going to be driven nuts by the defensive foibles and keeps him on the bench. And they kind of go down swinging with the same all defense, no offense type of team. That wraps up Roots Roundup. That's it. If other questions flow in, we'll try to hit them as we go, especially if we're talking about the team at the time.
Yeah.
Matthew, Big East, take it away.
The big bad East. It was a bad man last year, Kai. We saw the top of the lid come off with this conference. Obviously, UConn, national champions. Congrats, by the way, Mr. Hurley. Well done. Some doubters were very vocal against you for most of the offseason, even much of the season, but you shut them up pretty profoundly in the postseason. Xavier, Marquette, other two programs experiencing pretty massive renaissances. Shaka Smart and kind of his revamped approach offensively, and Xavier under the direction of Sean Miller. Other teams throughout the league, I think Villanova is probably one of the more fascinating storylines as well, with kind of their up and down kickoff of the Kyle Neptune era. Kai, initial thoughts on the league as a whole in terms of how you saw it play out last season?
So I did what Jim did last time for the ACC. I went back and listened to our Piggies preview podcast, which actually is a pretty fun exercise. I enjoyed it more than I thought I would.
To laugh at idiocy and smile at everyone. Every so often you get a smart thing in there.
Yes. So Matt led off with, dominance at the top. That's not what we expected. We expected a pretty parity-driven league last season with no real top elite tier competition. KenPom kind of thought the same thing. They had one preseason team in the top 20 in KenPom, ended up with 4 in the top 15. UConn winning the title certainly helps that. And yes, we said no title contenders in this conference to start the season.
Oops.
I was pretty adamant about it. And hey, I took a UConn future in November, so get off my back on that one.
Hey, you didn't stay too stubborn once you had your eye test exposed. You're like, okay, you know what? I was wrong. It's important, Kai. Take new information, be malleable with your conclusions.
Exactly. Anyways, Matt, but hey, you called 5 teams making the tournament. Good job for you. Except you said Butler would make it. Jim and I both said 6 teams. Alas, no big deal.
Butler was my worst take of the 2023 college basketball.
We'll get to that. Season. Oh boy. I just want to give a nod to this league. I said it all through the year on Twitter multiple times that like these were the most fun games to watch. If it was any of the top 5 teams playing each other, it was a blast. Like big time shot making typically, and close games that were actually good too. It wasn't just like 50-49 grind fests that were brutal on the eyes. They were actually awesome games. So nod to Marquette, to Xavier, helps that both those teams were awesome offensively and not as good defensively. Then UConn was dominant on both ends. It was just a really fun league. Going to Fox to watch some of the games, get Mr. Fanta, you get Gus Johnson, probably just added to it, Matt. But I loved this league this past season. Yeah,
I mean, you could argue what Creighton and Villanova, the two most pristine offenses as we think of them, were actually like the 5th and 6th best offenses in the league last year. So yeah, it was a fun league. I mean, there's 6 top 40 offenses, and then you obviously on the other end of the spectrum, Seton Hall, and then we don't need to talk about DePaul, Georgetown, Butler too much, but yeah, it's a fun league to watch. And I think the coaching upgrade, offensive talent infusion, I mean, the same sort of narratives you're seeing in the SEC, which is why the ACC and Pac-12 need to play catch up.
Yeah, new coaches, Matt. Who are they?
This year? Or are we going to reflect on last year's? Yeah, well, let's talk about this offseason. Let's talk this year. I do want to get to some of the first year reviews, but obviously the headliner is Rick Pitino coming down from, where was he end up? In New Rochelle. I guess it's just south to the Garden or wherever they're going to play there. I don't know if they're going to split the messy the home games, but anyway, yeah, Rick Pitino. I think everyone's pretty much just got on the exact same boat of St. John's will be really good right away. How good will they be? We'll see what the roster ends up falling into place, but I mean, this is an absolute massive coaching upgrade with all due respect to Mike Anderson. Jim, take on the Johnnies.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to them when we go team by team. And I wasn't super hyped on the roster, and I'm still not. But like home run hire, like you have to take Rick Pitino, even if you get him for 3 to 5 years. You just imagine that he puts the program back on a very clearly up trajectory, and then it becomes super appealing for whoever comes in next. I don't think Anderson was their first or second or even third choice when they were making that hire. And so now hopefully this gets the allure back on it with Pitino, that whoever they bring in after him, which presumably won't be that far off just because of age, it will be somebody who is like clamoring for the job to be in New York City, taking over for Rick Pitino, who's put it in position to succeed.
Yeah.
Hi, Georgetown. Another one of the bottom eating programs that got a shots of light. Ed Cooley, Benedict Arnold's Providence. I mean, obviously it's a coaching upgrade, and that's almost more due to the replacement than the successor. But I mean, we kind of talked this ad nauseum. We'll get to when we talk about Georgetown, but yeah, I mean, A++ coaching upgrade. You don't need to say anything else other than sorry, Providence.
I say, welcome to the Cooley Zone, Georgetown. Welcome to the Cooley Zone. You will finish between 40th and 80th every year in KenPom. Congratulations.
Oh, I think the ceiling's higher at Georgetown.
It's a little higher. Okay,
I think you'll be able to get maybe a little better talent. We'll see. I'm not going to condemn them to that yet. I won't do it.
30 days.
I said sorry, Providence, as if this was some massive downgrade, and I'm kind of I'm kind of in the Kim English camp, but I'm not going to go as far as to say he's a net upgrade or even net.
Did he write you a letter or something?
Ed Cooley. No, Jim, he's been seducing me with that media suave cachet that he has going on. But no, I think he's a better coach than people give him credit for. However, it is still a pretty high ladder to climb from where Cooley left the program and from what he's actually proven, which is not that much, to be honest, at this level.
He's a better coach than when he gets credit for. He gets credit for being an awesome coach. He got hired at Providence despite doing nothing. I think he's gotten a lot of credit for
not fair.
being a good coach yet. So the inverse.
Okay. Providence, they're going to be kind of in that weird no man's land of, we'll see how they can they stack up with the Joneses. But let's go team by team breakdowns here. Starting off with Marquette.
Yeah, going in conference finish order. That's what I did.
Conference finish order. The Golden Eagles won the league last year. Yeah, won by 2 games. 17-3 Xavier, 15-5 was second. One win shy of 30. Pretty, just kind of unforeseen explosion from the Eagles. Tyler Kolek comes in and just turns into an absolute fireball. One of the most important players in the country. If he's healthy against Michigan State, they may still be playing right now, or they may have actually marched even farther. What do you think is kind of in store for an encore? Like, is there a hangover coming here, or is this just like Shaka has this new system with this offense and they just keep it rolling with somewhat underrated, unheralded recruiting talent and prowess of sorts?
Just a perfect roster construction by Shaka. Every single best case scenario last season worked out. They realized best case scenarioism in terms of leaps from every single player. I was trying to grasp for straws at positive stuff from our Marquette preview because the media poll had them 9th, I believe. We all thought they would overachieve that rating, but we didn't.
We said like middle, right? I wish we were more emphatic.
It's not like we said like they would finish top 4, so I can't give that claim to us. I did say Kolek could be a MFer, so I'm giving myself credit on that one. You. The best take on the Marquette stuff is actually Jim. Jim said Cam Jones, he could average 15 points a game this year. Cam Jones averaged literally 15 points a game this season. So
Jimmy?
Kudos to Jim on that one. The entire country underrated Marquette last year. By my count, they're bringing back a lot of dudes this season. I'm sure they'll be ranked in the top 5, top 10 of most people's prognostications. And heck, they have proven every bit of that. Their offense is beautiful. I've said it a million times. I'll say it one more time, Jim. Most connected team in America last season.
Yeah, there was really no precedent for Shaka having that good of an offense. His best offense in his coaching career was 20th at VCU, like way back. Didn't have a single top 25 offense in 6 years at Texas, and suddenly they explode to 7th. I know much was written about it, like bringing in Nevada Smith and a lot of the different stuff they did to tweak and make that just a super skill-based system. They obviously sacrificed a little bit on defense, but this was the only team that beat UConn after February 11th. UConn pretty much rolled everybody else, and Marquette was able to beat them at the Big East tournament. Like Matt said, if Kolek stays healthy, maybe they play on all the way to the Final Four. FAU is not talked about as much as a darling. Marquette is the number 1 clear, surefire preseason team. If they made the second weekend, I probably think that's the case. I saw Alan asking about it in the chat. Like, why is this team not getting talked about as preseason number one? You can make a case for it. If Omax comes back and you're just like, I think they run it back and look just as good and are better defensively, maybe a little more stout as Ben Gold gains strength, Iguodaro gains a little more strength inside. You can make a case for it. I don't think you should be thrown stones at if you say Marquette's number one. So yeah, I mean, just what a job by Shaka, and they seem set up for more and more success.
Yeah, I don't think last year was like a fluke. It's certainly, you could make that case on paper, but you're right. The way I love how Shaka was like, man, I can coach defense, and I've gotten like the best athletes in the world, and I've had elite defenses at Texas, but he finally brought in some outside help with Smith and some of the other stuff they weaved in there, renovated the offense. So he's like, the offense we got humming finally. You give me less size, less 5 stars on defense, I can still get my guys to play hard. I know how to trap and pressure and all that stuff. So I kind of like this formula where he has a pretty good balance. I don't think we saw it tilting so heavily toward the offensive side this year, but I think this kind of framework going forward makes a ton of sense. And yeah, the roster is like, it's good. It's going to be old. It's going to have very much of like a, like the FAU, bring the whole band back and just kind of keep it rolling and explode. I mean, they already exploded last year, but I see like this team even having more upside to run, even though they are kind of the same cast of characters, many of which entering like that upperclassman stage.
But they were young last year. There's still room to grow.
Yeah, there's young. Pollock they're not all the way young, but youngish. They're kind of youngish. Yeah.
Pollock might be the best returning guard in America. I mean, you can make that argument.
All-American.
He's an All-American. Yeah. And last year, no, not a fluke. They only shot 35% from 3. They were 4th in the country, 2-point percentage, field percentage. That's something we say all the time is not fluky. That is maintainable. That is that goes forth. It's their offensive structure and their pieces that just makes them so awesome. Top 5 would not be a stretch.
Yeah, not at all. God, they were fun to watch. This is just turning into a love fest, but deservedly so. Like, why wouldn't it be a love fest after what they did last year? Mm-hmm. I saw 30-1. I think at Westgate might be the best price out there in the market. So if you love them, jump in and try to get that. I mean, if Omax goes pro, maybe that's more a proper price.
That's tough. Yeah,
but they've got other options with Joplin, and I know they bring in like a pretty versatile freshman class. So I think they'll be right back up there again.
I'm writing it to my little list here. I don't know why I haven't looked at Marquette 30. I think I'm just maybe waiting for people to keep forgetting about them. Maybe the value drops. Teaser, I have 2 more teams on my list from the Big East on my watch list. Wow. Just a continuation of the momentum they've garnered from last season. So let's keep going to the second place finisher last year. The X-Men, Xavier, under Sean Miller and his return to the Queen City. By all accounts, an A+ performance, exceeded most people's expectations. Top 15, 27 wins, with the loss to Shaka's former employer in Texas in the second weekend. I mean, I guess we were partially surprised, but not maybe that surprised given what Sean Miller did at Arizona and his familiarity with Xavier. This to me feels like kind of the mean of outcomes going forward, right? They're going to be competitive, upper half of the league next 5 years, rinse, wash, repeat.
Yeah, the next year's roster is a little Conference USA
it is a little
heavy.
Weaky. Yeah,
I believe there's 3 players from it, but this was just the best Conference USA that there's ever been. So Oliveri, Davion McKnight, Abu Usman, like those guys were part of a really tough league. Add them to Fremantle and a couple other Xavier pieces, and maybe they're able to stay right up there in that top 3. I was surprised looking back at how good some of Sean Miller's offenses were at Arizona. In my mind, it was like a team that just won with defense and was kind of ugly at times. But no, he had some really good offenses there. Last year was right up there with the best he's ever had. And what he really did was hit the gas. Like they really went. They ran very similar to when Tommy Lloyd took over his players and started to run. Well, he took over Travis Steele's players and started to run, and it worked out great for them.
Yeah.
Obviously came up just short of the Final Four, but man, truly a successful first year, and we liked the hire at the time, and it just, I think, has aged like fine wine.
Yeah, we were higher in the preseason. One of us said it was maybe the biggest upgrade in coaching in the entire country over Travis Steele. No offense, but kind of offense. I still think they overperformed our expectations because we did not give Colby Jones enough credit. He turned out to be incredible. Nobody saw Sully Boom being a first-team All Big East caliber player. I mean, my gosh, he didn't come out of nowhere. We knew he was good, but not that Conference type USA. Of caliber. I do think this roster is not as great. I do like Jerome Hunter coming back, but they lost Nunji, Boom, Kunkel, Jones. I think Miller will outperform wherever you think their rank should be next season. Miller will probably outperform it, but I don't think it's going to be top 2 every single year in the Big East.
Yeah, with the 37th at Bart Torvik right now, I bet they'll be
better
top
than
30.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd bet the over on 37. You're right. I mean, it does look very Conference USA, but you mentioned the boom last season. I think that speaks to Miller's ability to at least identify, but also develop and optimize his talent, extract the most out of those guys. So I'll be bullish get on Xavier. I'm not going to be betting against Sean Miller. That's for sure. Let's continue. Head out to Nebraska, Creighton, the jump shooting Jays, although not so much last season. Kai, kind of in the midst of an identity shift with the fulcrum that is Ryan Kalkbrenner at the forefront. The Jays still very good on offense, but defense is where they made their hay. A team that everyone we thought, right, would be like top 5, top 10. Jim was on his guys, relax. It's more of the same. Arthur Kaluma, he's really that good. Yada, yada, yada. And then turns out defense was just that good, and the offense still had the same issues that reared their ugly head and ultimately kind of what got them bit in the NCAA tournament. But program's in great state, and nothing about what we've seen is, kind of, again, adding some balance to the force. Talk about Shaka adding the offensive balance to his force. This is, I think, McDermott now adding the defensive balance to his force.
Yeah, still an awesome team this season. McDermott is a staple there. TBD, we'll see how badly they get poached from the NBA draft this offseason. But if everyone comes back that is in the draft currently, obviously they're a top 5 team or top 10, wherever you want to put them. We actually said on our podcast that they would have an awesome defensive team again this season. Last year, they're top 20. This season, 2 years ago, top 20. Last season, top 15. And we said if they make a giant leap on offense, then they could hit those major marks that people were expecting them to do. Well, they did. They finished 23rd in the country in offense after 112th. So now it becomes a little bit more plausible this team becomes a top 10 team next season instead of the major leap of last season. Yeah, they almost got there. Really good team. But healthy skepticism was warranted at the time, Jim.
Yeah, we ranked them 12th in our preseason top 40. They finished 12th at KenPom. They were a 6th seed. They made the Elite 8. Like, I know that Kalkbrenner missed time and had the bout with mono, but they also lost at Providence, to Marquette, at Villanova down the stretch. Like, they weren't some perfect team when Kalkbrenner was healthy. They almost made the Final Four in a region that got kind of blown up. But man, yeah, I like the ceiling a ton next year if Alexander, Kaluma, and Kalkbrenner all come out of the draft. I think Ashworth gives them just a little bit more shot making on the perimeter, and he can share playmaking duties with Alexander if he's there. Arabello gives him that, that guard off the bench that he was kind of at this year, but maybe they get a little more out of him. One thing, Matt, we said in the preseason was we liked them because they were deep. They weren't deep. They 351st in bench minutes, never developed a bench, almost the same issue that North Carolina had. And maybe that didn't bite them per se in the NCAA tournament, but you have 1 or 2 guys with bad nights like they did against San Diego State, and they just can't score. So I'd like to see them really develop that depth, that Mason Miller and some of the bench next year.
Yeah, and King, who a guy I kind of liked, he had a couple of good games up front. Didn't really stack up against the top of the totem pole competition wise, but you're right. I think if they just can extend that bench, they're going to be really good. And we'll see who all comes back. I don't have any whispers on what the Kalk, Alexander, and who's the third one there, and Kaluma winds are blowing. But yeah, if they all come back, I mean, that's a top 10 team, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Easy.
Love it. Yep.
All right. To the shockingly 4th place finisher in the league, which was kind of the fascinating conundrum with the reigning national championship UConn Huskies. Hit some hard times, Jim, once league play began after looking like the absolute juggernaut that they were in the postseason early in November. Hurley, I think, had a very good explanation for it. The familiarity within league, I think, got to the Huskies late in the dog days of conference play. That's when they looked mortal, but against a new, fresh set of competitors in the arena in the postseason, they just laid waste to everyone. So curious if that kind of trend upholds with how deep and vast their playbook is on top of the talent. But in terms of coaching upgrade perception schematically, I mean, Hurley was the number 1 winner last season, right? No one changed the perception about how good can he coach tactically than Dan Hurley.
Yeah, absolutely. He was a monster in the NCAA tournament. Some of the adjustments they made were ridiculous. And I don't know if he had a come to Jesus moment, but he did say like in January, he just was too worried about the refs and like just was kind of in his own head and not making the right moves and not putting guys in the right position to succeed. Like all the sagging off of Andre Jackson had kind of gotten to them. And then in press conference, he would laugh when people asked about that. He's like, we figured that out. That doesn't work. Good luck. Keep trying it, but it's not going to work. And he proved that repeatedly in the NCAA tournament. I think Kimani Young and Luke Murray probably get a hat tip here. I think they were a phenomenal staff, and Hurley constantly credits them. I'm curious how next year will go. I think Clingan for Sanogo, like you're not having much of a downgrade on a net basis there. It's a different kind of team. You're a little more defensive with Clingan locking up the rim. But Kai, I think Jordan Hawkins is a huge loss. Like, the best movement shooter in the country, maybe like off screens and the gravity that he has coming around screens. Teams are just panicked whenever he's catching the ball on the perimeter. That gravity, it's just something it's really hard to quantify. And you take that off. I mean, he had 109 threes this year.
Yeah.
And they were tough shots. So you take that away and maybe the offense settles down a little bit.
Yeah. Last season, their best was one of the best we've seen in the last 10 years, I think, in terms of his team. So there's nowhere to go but down, in my opinion. And UConn fans come at me. I think Clingan is a great candidate for a dark horse player of the year in the country. He could have an ED type of explosion. But there's no Donovan Clingan coming off the bench. Having Sanogo and Clingan just made them that much more dominant. Now Sanogo's gone. Hawkins, I agree, huge loss. If Andre Jackson goes pro, that's probably dark horse, maybe the biggest loss, because he did so many things besides scoring that just contributed to winning. And Dan Hurley is the first one to tell you that. So this will be a great team. Still be in top 25 or whatever. I don't see the upside this coming season as last year.
We'll be young.
I saw Jackson said like, I'm here as long as Coach Hurley wants me back. It's like,
right.
I don't know, man. If you go through NBA workouts and they're like, we want you ASAP. He's not quite
freak athlete.
Herb Jones caliber because he can't shoot at all. Jones could shoot a little bit, but I think he's like similar vein, like incredible defender, impacts winning all over the floor. Very, very curious to see what his pro decision ends up being.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be very young next year if he goes. Basically, Tristan Newton would be the only true upperclassman on the roster. I like how UConn built the competitive depth element last season, which I think everyone praised FAU for doing so well. But just like guys like Newton and Joey Calcaterra, like they were better because of the attraction and gravitational force that those other dudes force on the floor, right? Everyone on the floor is hard to guard in a certain way. It just makes everyone naturally better. So I kind of commend Hurley for like bringing in those kind of quasi depth adding pieces. You know, it's a good fusion, right? Got that young old mix. Next year again, we'll see if he can stay old with maybe one or two more transfer gets, but
he hasn't gotten one yet. And Pat asked that in the chat, like why no portal gets. I wonder if
not
it's
one
he doesn't know what he has to offer in terms of playing time because of wasn't sure what
Because
Sanogo
rookies are really good.
Jackson,
rookies are really good. You got a 5-star and 2 top 50 guys and like 2 more top. I mean, so it's a deep class. And Caravan's still there. So yeah, until Jackson makes his decision, you could see that being kind of a dicey transfer portal sell to those guys on the free agent wire. But yeah, UConn's gonna be good. Stay long term. No concerns, obviously, with Hurley.
Yeah, the Field of 68 did who's the best hire of the past 10 years. And they all kind of agreed it was Sampson, but I
Hurley was like, maybe Hurley.
Like,
yeah.
What about Hurley? He's the only one
in
the last 10 years that have won a title. Yeah. So you have to kind of give him a nod, even though he hadn't won a tournament game before this year, but
yeah,
he did win a title.
I'll disagree politely.
Okay.
Yeah, title's a title. As much as we always bemoan the crapshoot nature of the tournament, if you get one, man, that's worth its.
I mean,
weight in gold.
Only major mainstream programs win titles. Let's be honest.
I know. Well, that's kind of what he did. He brought him back to the old glory days. But all right, we're not going to debate that. Let's go to Providence. As Cool under much debate in terms of did Cooley handle the exit right, Kai? No one. I don't actually care, no. But that's what Providence fans are probably not too happy about how that went down. But they got Kim English, who they, I believe, talked themselves into loving. I wonder if they look themselves in the mirror morning and say, "Do we really like Kim English that much?"
They love
I don't know. Let's start right there. Kai. Kind of Providence jumping off the Ed Cooley diving board into the Kim English abyss. Where do you see it landing?
It's a downgrade, in my opinion. I think Kim English will bring in some pretty good talent. He hasn't necessarily done that yet. He's kept guys and he's brought in some A10 dudes, but he will get guys eventually. I still don't think he's proven to be a good coach. I'm not saying he's not yet, but he hasn't proven it, and that's objective. George Mason last year finished exactly where they were supposed to, and they probably underachieved most of the season, for instance. Looking back at our preseason podcast, we said they'd finish in the Cooley zone last year. They did. They're 40th. Hooray for us. We didn't believe the hype after the really good season. Jim, fantastic call once again here. He said Jared Bynum will not shoot over 40% from three again. He shot 31%. So
that was such a weird fluke here.
Claps to Jim on that one. He also said Noah Locke would be a much better shooter. That was true. And he also called the Bryce Hopkins breakout train. So we were kind of all over Providence coming into last year. I still think they slightly outperformed my expectations. They were feisty against the spread per usual with Cooley, especially as a dog. Going forward, though, I'm kind of worried about the program. Jim Kimmy, we know he's a media darling. Players probably love him. I will say that, but I haven't seen the results yet. I'm skeptical as of now.
Yeah, there's some weird dynamics with them late. Like they lost 7 of their last 11, and I think Providence optimists would say Cooley had checked out and was like already recruiting for Georgetown at that point. There was the one story that their whole team had gone to a concert the night before. They played terrible. Like there's that buzzing around there. But yeah, they really floundered late in the season. They had the comeback against UConn in the Big East tournament. It was like, maybe they've got some life, but fell to Kentucky. It was just kind of an odd end to the year. I actually really like their roster next year, like full disclosure.
Yeah, I do too.
English concerns aside, getting Pierre back kind of fills the point guard spot, way to beat him in 1v1. And then I saw speculation that maybe English has benefited from the NCAA's ruling or warning that you're not going to get a second waiver. And so like maybe that prevented Hopkins and Devin Carter from re-entering the portal because they were worried they might not be able to play somewhere. But English still had to bring him back. He was able to re-secure Garway Dual, the recruit that was a Cooley guy and ended up staying with Providence, which is impressive in itself. The talent is there, man. I think if he's going to have like a big announcement of how good he is as a coach, English can do it next year with that roster.
Yeah, I think he has to. If he doesn't make any headway with that roster, I think that like sets him back 3 years in terms of garnering the momentum toward getting back on the path that I think Cooley was on when he left. Like, I think we talk about the Cooley zone as the zone up until 2 years ago. And then there's kind of a net new higher Cooley zone the last 2 years and like his mini breakthrough. I think the English kind of falls back to the old Cooley zone range. That's where he probably, but this is the year where I think he has a chance to kind of keep what last season, the year before, Providence standards, legit upper end of the conference, top end competitor. The roster has the chops to do it this year. So yeah, he has to get the ground running. You're right, Jim. It's kind of an awkward situation with Carter and Hopkins. You're kind of trapped. Surprised I haven't really tested the NBA waters as heavily. Or maybe they just love Kim English and
I think
sold them. Yeah, that's
legit.
Like
players just adore the guy, which that's
respect.
part of being a coach. Yeah.
I'll add one more thing real quick. Just healthy skepticism here, more, I guess. So he brought arguably his 3 most impactful players from George Mason: Gaines, freshman Fernandez, who could be really, really good, 4-star recruit, and Oduro, all conference player. Against tier A and B competition, Gaines, 85-0 rating. Fernandez, 47-0 rating. Oduro, 95-0 rating. None of these guys have done very well against top tier competition. We don't know if they're power conference players despite their success at the lower levels.
It helps like for them that maybe they'll move down the pecking order, like where Hopkins and Carter are the guys and Oduro is a third option. It's kind of scary, but yeah, I mean, they've got to adapt to a higher level competition, and we said it, but English now has to coach against Pitino, Cooley himself, Hurley. This conference is loaded with great coaches, so it's going to be tough to make headway. Like Matt said, I think year one with that roster of holdovers and the best players from George Mason, that's when you got to make a statement.
Yeah, defensively, Oduro is a 5 in the Big East. No bueno.
Yeah, I worry about that too. I mean,
Duran Holmes, 34 points, 6 boards last year against Oduro in last game.
Jim, have you read all the Garway Dual hype that I have? I'm trying to make a list of like unheralded hyped freshmen who are going to be really good and way better than their rankings are. He keeps popping up on my Twitter feed. So
yeah, I like digging into those, and I think generally they're more right than they're wrong. But sometimes you get a guy like Javon Garcia at UMass who washes out, goes to JUCO, and is now at McNeese State. Like so. Right. Yeah, I've got to get more eye tests on those guys, and that'll happen more as we get into preview season.
We continue forth to Villanova, reflecting on Mr. Neptune, Kyle Neptune's first season at the helm. It was a bumpy one, Kai, to say the least. I think the roster limitations started to shine through, losing some critical pieces. from the prior offseason, as well as not having Justin Moore back for much of the start of the year. Overall assessment of Neptune's first season, given sort of the uncontrollable external stuff that happened there.
This was probably our best call of the offseason podcast for the Big East.
I think I was higher on Nova than both of you, though, right? But generally, you guys got this one right.
We were doubtful. We said it could all like go badly, and we weren't sure about Neptune. We said we loved what we did at Fordham, but now you look at Fordham and you look at Keith Ergo, and it's like, wait a second, was last season or 2 years ago, was that Ergo and not Neptune? Certainly a team effort, though. Who knows? His first season in Villanova, it's kind of tough to take much away because of the injuries, but the roster's not looking great. I'm not sure Mark Armstrong is a fantastic point guard, Jim. I mean, Justin Moore's back. He's fantastic, but you're losing Cam Whitmore, who, have you seen his testing numbers? This guy is like, yeah, he was awesome, but
ludicrous.
His athletic testing is like best ever. It's just like freakishly freaky. Hart, Bamba, Jim, they're good additions, but I don't think this team is like emphatically back by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, they're not like top 20, but I like what they've put together there. I mean, just the Hart Bamba additions seem to fit the like flexibility, positionless. Let's switch everything defensively. Dixon has held up very well in that kind of setting where he's ended up on guards. And we didn't fully nail it, Kai, because we did still begrudgingly rank him second in the Big East. I wish we had
good call.
Maybe shifted him down farther. Although we were going off of Rob's power rankings from the Almanac.
Yeah.
But I think we all kind of agreed, like second behind Creighton.
Yeah.
So we talked through all the pessimism points and we didn't listen to ourselves, which is kind of a thing we typically do on our daily shows and stuff throughout the season. So yeah, Matt, I'm still very much hesitant on Neptune. We talked about it a little on the board bets episode last week when we got through the Fordham one. I don't know. I like the roster. I don't love Neptune in charge of it yet. And we've seen everybody from that coaching tree not do that well. And a bunch of them have come home, as you noted in our master sheet here. It's going to be a lot of the guys that have left and maybe didn't really succeed away from Jay Wright.
Yeah, so you're worried about kind of like a stale groupthink type of thing happening where it's like, what do we really, without Jay Wright, what is the resumed or returning magic, I guess?
It's a little like the K tree.
Yeah,
no, those guys leave and like they just can't recreate the magic.
I will, yeah, I mean with Whitmore being out for what I think he missed 7 of their losses, right? So 17-17, he missed 7 games when they lost. So I think that does matter to a degree. However, I do think the floor should have been higher even with the stuff that happened. So I will concede some partial defeat on Neptune being awesome. I think he was just okay in year one. But neither here nor there. We've already discussed the coaching grade. Check out that podcast, by the way. That's on our Spotify and Apple feed. Kai, next team, Seton Hall. It was not a Pirate's life for me last year. A tough opening debut for the Pirates. But I did finish 10-10 in the league, despite a myriad of injuries, 17-16. I'm sure Shaheen Holloway in his first year after the St. Pete's Magic would have preferred a little bit of a boom coming out of the shoot, but just a ton of litany of injuries kind of derailed what was already a relatively limited roster, especially offensively. So I don't know. What's your thoughts on what he did? What's it look like going forward?
I think he did a fine job. I think our predictions were correct in that we thought they would have an awesome defense. I said they'd have a 0% chance they had a bad defense. They finished 20th. We were all in agreement on that one. We said they could be elite, and they pretty much were. Offensively, though, we had a lot of doubts because Holloway at his previous stop, St. Peter's, never had a good offense. This season, or last season on paper, their offense wasn't looking great. And lo and behold, they finished 133rd in the country in offense. I think Holloway is still a pretty good coach. We were obviously higher on them last year than what they actually finished. So they fell below our expectations and probably most people's expectations. But I still have some hope for this program going forward, Jim. They certainly have an identity. On paper next year, it's kind of looking more of the same. I still have concerns about offense, but that defense really could once again be a top 20, top 15 level.
Yeah, the identity, I wonder if it has just a ceiling, though. Like you said,
could be, yeah.
The defense could be really, really good, and they could still be just average because they're like every Holloway team's been bad offensively. The Elite Eight St. Peter's team got up to 231st, but they were 260th before the postseason run, and there was a lot of shot making in there. You go back to that overtime game against Kentucky, and the absolutely ludicrous shot making that they had in that game to win completely changed the narrative. I mean, like every single Shaheen Holloway team has turned the ball over like crazy 5 straight seasons. It just seems like they don't have a plan. You watch them and I'm like, this offense is just, can we get it on the rim? Maybe hope to get a board. Can we get fouled? They don't really generate a lot of good shots. And granted, they didn't have like a true floor general point guard. I think I've said all this stuff about Memphis, and then suddenly they got Kendrick Davis and a lot of the issues were eased. So maybe that'll happen if they get a real dominant point guard, but those guys are pretty few and far between. I think there's going to continue to be an offensive ceiling on the Pirates.
Yeah, we all got so enamored with the beautiful sets that he was running with the fun St. Peter's run that I think we talked ourselves into thinking he evolved as an offensive coach. And I actually believe he is a good offensive coach. I'm putting some of the blame on the personnel he had last season. But I think people need to remember, you're right, the track record of his exceedingly tilted style of teams before last year, before the St. Peter's run, is probably a good indicator as to the types of teams he'll be building going forward and the places where they'll probably struggle the most, which is on offense. Like, let's just, call it like it is. Again, we'll see what a personnel reshuffling, does this year, next year, long-term, but that's, I think, kind of this is what Seton Hall basketball will probably look like the next, few years, just hopefully with a higher ceiling, given more health.
I think the personnel is like objectively worse right now.
This coming up here, not to go overly into the roster for next year. I agree. I think it's a net downgrade. They're gonna have to win uglier than they did last season. So not a great omen there.
Yep.
Let's talk about the Johnnies, Mr. McKeon.
Yeah.
Rick Pitino, you called this one prophetically last year. You sold a lot of the Mike Anderson stock. So this was not a top 40 team, and you were 100% right. They were 82nd when they finished in KenPom. Started off 8-0, beat a bunch of nobodies at home.
Yeah.
Went to Iowa State, got beat by 11. That's all right. We'll be fine. Come back home, get a first conference win against DePaul, beat New Hampshire and Florida State 11-1 as they entered the last week of December. And then they played Big East teams. And then we all saw what happened. Kai, thoughts on the Johnnies last year and what a sigh, or I guess a breath of fresh air Rick Pitino is?
Yeah, we all smelled blood at KenPom's preseason rating last year. They were 37th in KenPom, which we were like, there's just no chance they're better than 2022 when they had Justin Champagnie, and he was fantastic and their best player by far. And Justin or Julian? Julian, right?
Julian.
Champagne. I don't know.
Thank goodness I corrected that. Anyways, skeptical. Yep, came to fruition. A frustrating team like always, right? They beat freaking UConn at UConn, and they lost to Butler. It's just a typical St. John's team. Now, Pitino, maybe the best hire in the country. I might call it the best hire in the country. He's going to turn this program around completely. I haven't taken many futures yet. I have a future on St. John's. I had put something on there. I don't even care what the roster is. I just know he's going to be way better than last season for this team. And I fully expect them to get some more transfers in the portal here coming up. Although, Jim, they do have quite the list already they've brought in. The roster on paper, I'm not super excited about, but I am excited about Pitino and his abilities to make it work.
Yeah, I think they've got 8 transfers in now. I think 4 of them are just like objectively not Big East players, unfortunately, but 4 of them are pretty solid. And you bring Soriano back, the man in the middle that emerged into a dominant force. Yeah, in the preseason pod, we were like curious how he fit with their style, and it just was totally fine. It ended up a beast for them, arguably their best player. The Curbelo Posh thing didn't work. I can't imagine, I can't believe that was something that was proposed as being a backcourt that was even tenable with no shooting and turnovers like crazy. So this reset button with Pitino is about as good as it gets. I think if you didn't know that they were going to get Pitino, would you have fired Anderson? Was it just like time to move on? Or...
I think so. Yeah. Okay. I actually liked Anderson as a coach when he was in the Midwest, but I think Goodman had the best take where him in New York just didn't ever feel right. And it never really worked. I think he was too caught up in taking flyers on highly fun, entertaining, shiny objects, but like lacked actual substance and efficiency, and, Posh and Curbelo being the name focus. So yeah, it was time to move on. I think it was. Yeah,
we'll see how the current roster, like Aline was the 7th man, but it was on one of the best teams in the country. So maybe you slide him in there. Glenn Taylor, I like, but that team was like 200th at KenPom at Oregon State. Dennis Jenkins, Pacific and Iona pedigree. So I don't know. We'll see. Luis has some upside, and Pitino is obviously a great developer of players. I'm just, Kai, I never ended up pulling the trigger on St. John's, and I probably would have if I was in Illinois after the tournament ended and the odds opened. But then like I saw the names that were rolling in. I was like, I'm going to wait and see. And so I still haven't pulled the trigger on the Red Storm.
I know they're in on a couple guys that recently hit the portal, like Zuby Ejiofor. I mean, if they get him along with Soriano, just like tag team in that, I think that'd be fantastic. So I have high hopes that they're going to get more guys. But yeah, I agree with the current state of the roster, Matt. A little worried going forward. If he's there for 5 years, I think the program's going to be in great shape, and it'll be a perennial turning team under him.
I agree. Nothing else to add. I kind of talk about the last 3 teams here in group kind of gross fashion because I don't think any one of them deserve their own segment.
Wow. That's kind of harsh.
Yeah, it is harsh, but I think deserved. I mean, Butler, what was that last year? The absolute calamity. DePaul's been a calamity. In Georgetown, while there's greener grass ahead, bluer skies ahead, still just an absolute calamity last season. We'll start with Butler, though. Kai with the worst take of the Big East podcast. Kai, why don't you tell everyone what you told people over the airwaves? And we might have to go back and redact this take.
To be fair, you kind of supported it, but I said I like Chuck. I said I like Chuck Harris, and boy, I was wrong. Because Chuck Harris was terrible again this season. I thought he kind of turned it around. His stats were not catastrophic, but I just watched those games. And I was like,
"Yep, I agree."
He's actually like actively hurting them, and you saw that when he was out for 3 games and they beat Xavier and St. John's. And it was like, wait a second, this team is better without him in the lineup. So him not being there anymore is a good thing. I think Posh Alexander is an upgrade for sure. I think Mata did some really smart things in the transfer portal. I don't think they're going to be top 5 in the Big East this season, Jim, but I think they'll be better. And I like where Mata's got things going long-term.
Yeah, so the smart thing I said on the preseason pod was, are we sure Chuck Harris will ever score efficiently?
And
Which I don't think he ever will.
Nope.
Yeah.
The dumb thing I said was, Eric Hunter, what a great pickup. He's going to help them. He's better than Aaron Thompson. He was awful. Like eye test stats, like it just seemed like he wasn't clued into what was happening. Like he wasn't attending their practices and then was playing in games or something. It was really weird. Just did not work out at all. I still love Mata and think he'll get it going, but I don't really totally love the transfers he's brought in either. Like, I'm not sure outside of Posh, who's like super Big East caliber, and Pierre Brooks was a bit player from Michigan State. Telfort was fine, but Northeastern's been really bad with him as one of their best guys. DJ Davis can absolutely shoot, but is he Big East caliber in other regards? I don't know. I'm a little bit hesitant on them. Manny Bates has got to figure out what he's doing. I think that's a pretty huge swing domino in terms of shot making, or not shot making, shot blocking, and then just interior scoring. So Matt, I'm wait and see with them. I think bottom half again though.
Yeah, I'll give one last chance at giving an excuse card. They had like no one playing for most of the offseason, so they kind of came in limping out of the gate. And you could argue that getting behind the 8 ball kind of deflated this team spiritually. But I think that revealed the concern with the whole Thad Matta return to the sideline thing. He looked just generally less spirited, more agitated, more worn than I had hoped. And I just think the program as a whole lacked any sort of like optimism last season, right? Like even with all the stuff that's going on, just the Thad Matta return didn't give me any sort of, just the way they played, I thought was even very, like the offense they were very antiquated. I know that was partly because they didn't have guys in practice to run the stuff you wanted to run, whatever. It didn't look good. So I'm kind of withdrawing a lot of my Butler chips that I had in last season before Mata got there.
I think there's some hope though. I think the personnel really was a thing. I just don't think those guys were very good. Certainly didn't play well together. I'm talking about the guards because I think Manny Bates was good.
No shot creation. Like their point guard play, if you're leaning on Hunter, that just was a disaster last year.
And even Lukosius, a guy who we praised a lot, he still didn't take great shots and make great decisions all the time. But to our credit, 130th to start in KenPom, they got all the way up to 74th. We were kind of directionally correct. They would be a lot better than preseason expectations. They fell down to 119. It wasn't a good thing, but stuff happens along the way, Matt. I'm grasping for straws there, I suppose. But
Kai, I'll grasp one more with you. They took K-State to the woodshed. I watched the game. Took them, control the wire to wire.
Yeah, right. I know. It's a good win.
Well, they had the mid-big. I don't know if there was something going on in the locker room, but
could be.
In the middle of Big East play, they lost by 21, 30, 21, 21 in 4 straight games. That was 2 games after losing by 25 to Seton Hall. It's like they lost by 46 combined to Seton Hall. Twice. Like what? Why? Why was that team just so much better than them? I don't really get it. It's like they couldn't handle physicality. I agree with Kai. I still think it's gonna trend up and they'll figure it out. But this is a different era than what Matta was coaching in before. So perhaps it's not going to be exactly translatable.
And we bring it back to the Mecca, well, Chicago, our Mecca. DePaul, Demon basketball, playing possessed. This program is possessed by something very sinister. 3-17 in conference play last year, a step back for Mr. Stubblefield after quietly encouraging, I guess, 2022. He went 6-14 that year, 15-16 last year, drops 3 games in league, 5 overall. But this is outside the top 100 in KenPom. Again, I mean, what is there to say about DePaul at this point?
Tell them what they did wrong, Kai.
They signed Caleb Murphy. We bashed him in the preseason. Caleb Murphy transferred from South Florida. He had an 80.70 rating. He was really, really bad. When he was out of the lineup, you could argue they played to a higher power rating, and they probably did.
They did. They're better without him.
This roster coming up is really bad. I think they're going to be worse than last year. I think they are a lock to finish last in the Big East. There, I said it, a lock. And it might be Stubblefield's last year. Not to really to any fault of his own. It's the program, but you need to get me more juice than Elijah Fisher, Jeremiah Oden, Chico Carter, and Jaden Henley. I need more. I understand it's DePaul, but you're still in Chicago. I don't know what to do there.
It's a lot of reclamation project swing. Sorry, Jim, on like 5 4-star guys who just didn't do anything at their first stops, where it's like, part of me likes that strategy, but then it just seems like when I see DePaul sign that guy, I'm like, that's going to be a flop, right? That's just kind of my general inclination to project.
Right. If somebody else got Elijah Fisher, I'd be like, "Ooh,
right.
Former top 50 recruit. Like, let's turn this into a star." And I see DePaul, it's like, that probably won't work.
Yeah, nothing. Yeah.
They're going to have the same problem they had this year, and it's that they run a ton of isolation, and it ends up with Caleb Murphy, and he's a bad isolation player. It's like 33 for 90 from 2-point range last year. Didn't really trend up as he got healthier. That's just such a problem for me. I know Ongenda was hurt most of the year. If they get him back for the full season, I think that's going to really help the interior defense. But I think the offense is going to be a serious issue with Murphy being at the center of it. So I have a hard time getting optimistic while he's still in the mix.
Career 20% from 3. He's never had an O rating over 90. Career 41% from 2. 56.
I'll say one thing. Sorry, I've been the injury card excuse giver all off season. You got to mention that their 2 starting bigs were basically just non-existent for.
I mentioned Ongenga being out until like the very end, and they played 20 games.
But. Yeah, he played 8 games, so that's obviously big, right?
But they didn't win. They went like 1-7 when he did play, and that's, I don't know, man. I'm concerned.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. Package. Hold on. I'll kick it to Kai here for a quick Georgetown primer while I go answer the door. Kai, Georgetown, bad team last year. Good coach now. Your thoughts?
Yes, you're exactly right, Matt. And you guys had a board bet, you and Jim, preseason last year. Jim thought Georgetown finished higher than DePaul. Not a terrible take, but they had Patrick Ewing, so that didn't work out very well.
Yeah, Kai, if you told me DePaul would go 3-17, I'd be like, "Oh, I can win this bet." It's like, yes. No, you can't.
So do we have true straight years of the Big East having the biggest coaching upgrade in the country? It could happen. It could be with Ed Cooley taking over Ewing. And I don't think Ed Cooley's a top 20 coach by any stretch of the imagination. Just look at his performance. His preseason versus finishing at Providence versus expectations has never been fantastic. He's been a good ATS coach as a dog, but he has not completely lifted the program. I know he's done a great job there. I'm not trying to bash him, but I'm not saying he's a top 20 coaching hire. But Ewing was literally maybe the worst coach in the country last year outside of Kenny Payne and my new punching bag, Hubert Davis. But this season, he has a good roster. He's not Patrick Ewing. Georgetown will be better, 100%. It's guaranteed. Are they still a bottom half Big East team? I kind of think so, Jim. And we had a question in the chat. Will Providence or Georgetown finish better? I think relative to expectations, Georgetown will finish better than Providence.
Yeah, it's tough to know who to trust. I think the roster is just like demonstrably better for Providence, so I'm going to give them.
It is way better.
Yes,
the tip of the hat there. I like some of what Georgetown has done in the portals, taking some younger guys that hopefully will be there for multiple years, and Cooley can actually develop a bunch of guys. I think that are from DC. I think Nationwide Nolan on Twitter pointed that out. He's like, okay, we're getting some local guys, bring them back and try to build the program that way, establish the connections with a lot of the local coaches. Maryland's trying to do the same thing. They all want to own the DMV because it's so talent rich. Just as recently as 2 years ago, Providence fans were like, what are we doing with Cooley, man? Like they had gone 13-13 in the COVID year, missed the tournament. We're going to be an 8 seed the year that got canceled. And before that had missed the tournament. And then he had 2 awesome years and it was like, oh, he's a monster. Like, I think there's some ebbs and flows to the program.
Yep,
and
agree.
He's still a massive, massive upgrade because who he's replacing was just like clearly the biggest disaster, like 2-38 the last 2 years in the Big East. Like I think that's legitimately the record. So it helps to bring in Cooley as a floor raiser, and he's much better than just a simple floor raiser. But I still think it's going to take a little more time, especially given the youth on the roster, Matt.
Yeah, it's going to take at least 2 years. Like people talk about how he was Bolton. Was he recruiting before he actually left Providence? Like, well, it looks like he was just recruiting high school guys because he didn't exactly land a blockbuster list of transfers. I think Providence is the better team on paper next year, and I think they'll probably be the better team overall. So that's my, you're fine take to Providence fans, I guess.
Well, my take was Providence will be 40th preseason. Georgetown will be 100th preseason. I think Georgetown will outperform 100. I think Providence will underperform 40.
Okay, fair. That's fair.
Was my take there, just based on roster. What I'm saying is Cooley's a better coach than English, but he's only had one top 30 team in KenPom ever. So that goes against kind of perception of Providence is always good under Cooley. They're good, but they're not elite ever, and they never were. They never were elite. His highest seed was 4, a good seed, but other than that, it was 6. And Providence is a much different program than Georgetown, but it's going to take a little bit of time. It's not going to be a top 25 team immediately. And I agree with you guys. The roster is not quite there yet, though I do like Epps, and I agree with Jim taking a swing on a guy like Styles or Brumbaugh. It's really promising, and it's a good call, I think, for Cooley.
I'm excited to see if Cooley starts to actually pack that arena because it's been barren. An NBA arena with a team that never wins. People just weren't interested. Maybe Cooley is as good as like fan outreach as you can find and getting people excited. Look how he turned the dunk into a fortress the last 2 seasons, but that usually goes hand in hand with winning. And they started winning a ton in 21-22. So the fans really, really packed it and carried over into last year. I think maybe it's chicken and egg. Is the winning first or does the atmosphere come first? And we'll see.
Yeah. In general, building a close, tight-knit, connected fan base in a big, sprawled out geographic city is just not a good, DePaul, any of the New York schools, it's just tough to do. But I think obviously there should be some more people run to the turnstile because Cooley isn't there and not the disaster that was Patrick Ewing. Kai, final takes on the Big East. Better next year than last year. More the same from last year. How many tournament teams, Jim? Let's go all the way there. Let's just jump the gun completely.
I can't go all the way to how many tournament teams. There's too many questions on rosters. I'm going to take the easy way out on that question. But I think it's better because in the last 2 years, they've dropped Mike Anderson, Travis Steele, Patrick Ewing. And as much as I'm maybe cold feet on English, like he's probably an upgrade over those guys. And Patino is clear upgrade. So it's just getting better and better on the sideline. And they have the defending national champion and a lot of talent in the league and rabid fan bases because there's no football. So I'm excited to continue watching the Big East. And I think it'll keep its status, Kai, as like a top 2 or 3 league.
Yeah, my knee-jerk reaction to Matt's question was like, no, it can't be better. Well, yeah, I think it actually will be. There's arguably 3 top 10 teams, Marquette, Creighton, UConn. That's better than last year already. And now you got Xavier's always going to be good. We'll see. The middle is where I kind of, it's like, will Villanova, will Providence, will Seton Hall, will those teams be any better than last season?
Yeah.
Will Butler be any better than last season?
I think they'll all be better. Yeah, I think they'll all be better. I think it's a deeper league next year. Not as good at the top.
Last year.
Seton Hall's not better than last year either. I think
so. There's 2 teams. St. John's is way better, and I think Georgetown's way better, but DePaul's not. So it's kind of like I would say slightly better on the whole in terms of like KenPom conference rank than last season.
Yep.
Well done, fellas. I have nothing else to add. The Big East always delivers. Thank you for resurging your conference after we threw some haymakers at you a few years before. I do remember I had some shade to throw at that league that seemed like it was becoming Villanova and the everybody else group, but now it's a real league. Fellas, in terms of podcasting cadence, are we taking next week off and then returning the week after, or are we coming back live with another review next week?
I think we just keep going, right?
Keep it rolling.
Like through
good news for the fans.
Huge recap of Charleston. That's going to be
special pod emergency on Sunday evening when none of us are in any condition to do so. But yeah, stay tuned. Follow us on Twitter. We'll keep you guys posted with all the good news and nuggets. For those of you stopping by live, thank you for joining us. For those of you listening on the podcast, thank you for listening. Until next time, cheers.
Oh yeah, I've got to stop it. End stream.